Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about the new data classification and storage selector tools. So if that's not what you're signed up for, you might be in the wrong spot, but there is another presentation right after us. Less entertaining one is what I heard. My name is Ben Archer. I'm the privacy manager in enterprise technology, and with me is Bree Masheri. Introduce yourself.
I am a senior cybersecurity ops engineer here at the Security Operations Center at ASU.
If any of you have been using data at ASU for a while, you're probably familiar with this not terribly attractive Google sheet called the data handling matrix. When we were first tasked with this project, this was the tool that told you whether it was safe to store a particular type of data in a particular system. And it had a slew of challenges. It was kind of difficult to interpret what this actually means. And yes, with encryption and approval. Well, whose approval? Who do I have to ask? It was incomplete. It didn't have all of our data types or all of our storage solutions in it. We had data sources that were listed that we didn't have a contract with, so they weren't even tools that you could use anymore. We didn't have a process for maintenance, and so a lot of these things ended up being out of date. We had unclear instructions, which led to mistakes and potential misuse. And it was all reliant on subject matter experts. So we didn't have a reproducible process to determine, could this type of data safely be stored in this type of system? So those were the challenges that we identified and said, let's find a better solution to this. And the first step was figuring out the data classification, because in this, previous model, we just assumed everybody knows, am I handling FERPA data or GLBA data or PHI? We expected folks to actually know all of those things and understand them. So to address that, we created a new data classification tool that just walks you through a series of questions. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so that we can see all of it on screen, that asks a series of questions and then gives you, here's the classification for your data, and here are the regulations that may apply. So for example, is your data export controlled? And if you don't know, there is an ASU export control wizard, but I'm going to say I know that my data is not export controlled, so I'll hit no. Is it shared from outside of ASU and under NDA? So we have some contractual confidentiality requirements. In my instance, I'm assuming that I'm using sort of student bio demo data. So it's going to have data about students, but it's not something that we got outside under NDA. Does it relate to individuals? And this is where our decision tree kind of splits, because we have the set of regulations that are privacy regs about individuals, and then we have things like export control and ITAR and security and safety, those sorts of things. But since I'm talking about students, yes, this is about people, and it is not de-identified. Is it used only for the purpose of single sign-on? We do have an exception in our data handling standard for just the use of single sign-on. The libraries use this quite a bit. But no, it has some other data, so it's not just used for single sign-on. Now we say, what is the source of these individuals' data? So yes, the US, and let's say I've got some people in the European Union and maybe the United Kingdom. Because I selected the European Union, it's going to ask me about GDPR sensitive data. Does it have any of these other data types that could be considered sensitive in Europe? Since I'm talking about biodemo data, it's going to have some racial, ethnic origin information in it. So I'm going to say yes. Next, is it a law enforcement record? There's a FERPA exception specifically for law enforcement records maintained by the local police department. So if it's not maintained by ASU PD, this does not apply. So I'm going to click no. But if you're not sure, here's the policy from CGIS on what records do count. Is your unit a HIPAA covered entity? We are a hybrid institution, so we have multiple HIPAA covered entities and then other organizational units that are not covered entities. If you're not sure, click this link down here. It'll give you a list of which units are CEs and which are not. I'm an enterprise technology, which is a HIPAA covered entity, so I'm going to click yes. But this is not information about health treatment, or healthcare payment. So I'm going to click no, which means it's not protected health information under HIPAA. Does it include payment card information, credit card, debit card, card holder information? No, we don't store that stuff anywhere at ASU, just so you know. Now, is it about students? Yes, this is about students, so FERPA is implicated. Is it limited to directory information? And here's the tricky part, with all opt-out students excluded. So if students have opted out of the FERPA directory information disclosure, we have to exclude all of those students from our data set, or we can't rely on the directory information exception. In this case, I have all kinds of students, so I'm going to say, no, it's not just directory information. If you need definitions, you click down here on the link for directory information. It'll tell you which fields are included or not included in FERPA directory information. Does it contain financial aid information from the FAFSA or the ICER? In this case, no. And then, does it include education records? And here's the definition. It is directly related to a student, and it is maintained by ASU, so I'm going to say yes. And now, we get our data classification. Your data, trying to figure out this trackpad. Your data is classified as sensitive. So now we know what the sensitivity level, public, internal, sensitive, highly sensitive. And it gives some information, links you to the data handling standard where you can learn more, and the ET data storage selector tool, which we'll be demoing in just a minute. It also tells you down below, here are regulations that apply to your data. Since I selected the European Union, GDPR shows up, and it has a link to ASU's GDPR page for more information. Since I selected the UK, GDPR UK shows up. Since I selected sensitive information, GDPR sensitive, and finally FERPA. And again, links to our FERPA page, etc. So that is the data classification tool. And if you would like to try it, think about a data set that you are wrestling with. You can scan the QR code, take a minute or two, and run through this process yourself to determine what your data classification is and what regulations apply. Remember what it gives you, because we will be using this in the next exercise as well. And now I'm going to hand it over to Bree. And if you could take a minute, do scan your QR, or if you're like me, you don't like scanning QRs, we put the link down here as well. You can type that in, follow through the wizard.
Right, I still see a couple phones up, so I'm gonna give you just a second more to scan that. So I will be demoing the data storage selector tool, and we're going to take you into that finder, which, as Ben pointed out, is linked in the classification tool. And Ben just took you through, how do I classify my data? What regulations apply? But the question now becomes, where do I store that data? And the data storage selector tool is our answer to that question. And I do want to point out that this is an enterprise-wide storage selector tool. There is a KE storage selector tool that is specific to researchers. So we do have that linked right here. If you are a researcher and you have research data, that's where you want to go. But this tool does offer enterprise-wide tools that is managed and supported by ET. And this data storage selector tool is here to tell you what storage solutions meet the regulatory requirements for the data that you collect. So what does that mean in layman's terms? There's a whole bunch of laws that Ben just went through, and all of those laws have certain technical requirements. And that technical requirement might be, hey, you have to have a password. Hey, this has to be behind 2FA. So we went through the painstaking and exciting process of mapping out all those rules to all of our enterprise-wide services to say which of these are compliant. And we put it all in this tool for you so that All you need to do is answer 2 simple questions to get the answer. So we'll keep going with Ben's example. We have sensitive information, and then we have FERPA and GDPR. And I do want to point out here at the bottom, sensitive unregulated, just because it's a little bit out of bounds of the rest of the categories that you see above there. Sensitive unregulated is a category of data where the information is still restricted, but it's not necessarily covered by any specific regulation. So an example of a data set that might be included in that is an employee's home address. We're not putting that out there for anyone and everyone. It is restricted. We do want to keep it internal to ASU and protected. But it's not necessarily mentioned in GLBA or GDPR or those kinds of regulations. So we do have that extra category in there for any data sets that don't necessarily fall under a specific regulation. So on the left-hand side, I've answered those 2 questions. And on the right-hand side, you can see that some of these options are grayed out because those solutions are not compliant. The solutions that are not grayed out are ones that we can select from. So I will go ahead and choose Exchange as an example. And let's take Dropbox. And when you scroll down, you can see just a basic service description that gives you more information about what does the service do? Does it meet my needs as far as like what I'm looking for in a collaboration tool or a storage tool? And next, we do have some storage solution responsibilities that are specific to the tool that you have selected. So for example, Outlook has the storage solution responsibility of if you're going to put HIPAA data in Outlook, if you're going to send an email with HIPAA data in it, we have some specific guidelines and some specific tips and tricks for how you secure those emails. And we give you a nice little screenshot in there too. I don't like reading through paragraphs to get through what I need to know. So just a simple screenshot showing, hey, add secure to your subject line, and it encrypts the message. We also have a last updated column. As Ben pointed out earlier, that spreadsheet was very, very outdated. It was empty. And so one of the popular requests for this tool was that we have an updated date so that you guys know that the information you're getting is current. It's been reviewed. And that's important to all of us at ASU, both as administrators of this tool and as users of this tool. And the last column we have here is the ASU responsibilities. You'll notice that it's the same between the 2. But these are just general guidelines for security best practices that ASU and these regulations have established. So some examples of that is you should encrypt everything. You should make sure that when you're granting access to these services, that it is to authorized and trained individuals. So there's just a list of a couple things there that should be reviewed. And lastly, we have covered here that we have enterprise-wide tools, but I know you're looking at this and then you're like, hey, something's missing. There's this one tool that I want to see on there. So we have enabled the service owners of tools to now submit a ServiceNow catalog request linked down here at the bottom to say, hey, I want my tool to show up here. I want you guys to assess it and add it to the tool. So we can do that through this link here at the bottom. And then we have some important notices at the bottom. I do want to point out that this tool is meant to assess if these solutions comply with their regulations. However, the other half of this story is that they need to be architected in a way that is secure. And so we always encourage, especially with some of the larger services like AWS or GCP, for you to reach out to the service owner of that tool to make sure that the instance that you're spinning up and the data you're putting there is architected in a secure way. And also, just, if it's not already apparent, we don't go putting ASU data into our personal Gmail, into our personal Drive, our personal Dropbox. This tool is very, very scoped to. These are enterprise purchased, enterprise supported tools. So I think that just about covers it. I think I'm gonna let Ben go ahead and wrap up and take any Q&A that we have.
Good. Thank you, Bree. One last thing is this last piece here. Just because a solution is capable of storing sensitive information doesn't mean it can be shared any way you want. So Exchange, for example, can be used to house protected health information, PHI. That doesn't mean that you can take protected health information and email it to anyone you want and be in compliance with HIPAA, right? So we want to make sure that folks understand that in addition to the system being compliant, we and our use of the system also has to be compliant. So to finish up our exercise from before, now you can scan this link or go to getprotected.asu.edu/finder and use the information that you got from the data classification tool in the last step, fill it out and see which storage solutions are available to you that are compliant with the regulations that your data, that apply to your data. So I'll give you a minute to scan that. And in the meantime, do you have any questions about either of these tools? Yes. Yes, would be happy to. The question was, can we show how to access these from Get Protected? So I'm just going to go to Get Protected. And under Policy and Practices, we'll go to Data Storage. And here's the link to both tools right at the very top, the Storage Selector tool and the Classification tool. So we are in the process of revamping Get Protected, and I have made sure that these two tools don't move around because we are telling everyone how to get there. So we want to make sure that they're still easy to get to after the revamp. Great question. Any other questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. That is an excellent question and leads me to this statement right here. We have a Slack channel and an email address set up to answer exactly those questions. In that case, I would want to double check PCI. The PCI data security standard specifies exactly which items are considered cardholder information. And I believe last four of the card is not considered cardholder information, but I would want to double check. So feel free to send a message in Slack or shoot an email. We'll do the research and get back to you. Yeah. Any other questions in our last couple minutes? Yes. That is a great question. Yes, it is not on there. So because we are looking at here are the requirements for each of these regulations, and then here's where we find evidence of all of these requirements. The Google contract was in the process of being renewed, and so it was sort of wending its way through all of the security reviews. So we did not yet have the evidence to put it on there, but as soon as we do, that is what will be going on there. And if you know the system owner or product owner for any of the Google products, feel free to send them that link to submit a request. That's where they will upload the evidence that we're looking for, and then we'll be able to add it on there. Other questions in our last few minutes, Josh? There are precious few locations where we are willing to store highly sensitive data because it is generally stuff that is very highly controlled and usually health and safety related. And so in those cases, if you have highly sensitive data and don't already know where to put it, please contact us and we will help you. Good question, Josh. Yes, FERPA opt-out. If someone has opted out of any level of directory information disclosure, then we cannot rely on the directory information exception to disclose their information. So if you aren't excluding anyone who's opted out at any level, then we can't use that exception. We have to treat it as if it is regular FERPA education record. If they opted out of directory information disclosure, none of their records can be disclosed using the directory information exception. So we have to treat them all as if they were regular education records, non-directory information. Other questions? Got 3 minutes left. If not, I will pass it on to the next team to start their presentation. Last call. If you have anything, if you're walking out and remember, oh, I should have asked this, we have an email address, we have a Slack channel. Please reach out to us. We're happy to help. And have to thank Oli and Rachel here for their hard work on developing both of these tools as well. Oli. And we have a booth, so feel free to stop by the booth, grab some finished candy. Thank you, everyone.